and you're leading emissions accounting and the Pacific Northwest to Alaska Green Cruise Corridor initiative. So I'd love to hear from you. How do clean fuels fit within the port's climate strategy? And what role does the port play in building the conditions to scale these fuels? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Javaria, and thanks to VMCC and the team for inviting me to present today. My name is Ryan Child, and I'm with Port of Seattle's Maritime Environment and Sustainability team. And today I'll be sharing about how the port is working to build the conditions for clean fuels in Seattle and in the Seattle-Tacoma Gateway, and how we're taking steps to plan for lower and zero emission alternatives. And we can jump to the next slide. And I'll start with just a quick overview of our lines of business at the Port of Seattle, because we have a really diverse range of operations, which I think is really important context for how we're thinking about new fuels and different alternatives in terms of building demand for these fuels across the region, and also thinking about different use cases and different types of fuels that might be targeted for different areas of our operations and lines of business. So at the Port of Seattle, in addition to our maritime side of the house, we own and operate the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. It is the 11th busiest airport in North America. On the map here, it's that large swath of land that's shown in teal just south of Seattle and south of the Elliott Bay area, where most of our maritime facilities are oriented around. And then in addition to the airport, on the maritime side of the business, we're one half of the Northwest Seaport Alliance. The Northwest Seaport Alliance is a marine cargo operating partnership between the ports of Seattle and the Port of Tacoma. It is the 7th largest cargo gateway in North America. So the NWSA operates all of the container cargo terminals in Seattle as well as in Tacoma. So those facilities are shown in yellow on the map here. And then outside of the Seaport Alliance's container cargo operations, our maritime portfolio at the Port of Seattle includes a grain terminal, as well as commercial fishing, recreational boating, and liveaboard marinas, and then an extensive real estate portfolio across 12 different campuses in Seattle and over 80 buildings. And we are also one of the largest cruise ports on the West Coast. We're expecting nearly 330 cruise ship calls this season, with most of those going from Seattle up to Southeast Alaska. So we're a home port, cruise port within the Alaska cruise market. And then across all these operations, the port, as shown by the statistics on the slides here, we're one of the largest economic drivers in Washington state. So contributing over 200,000 jobs across the region and billions of dollars in economic activity. Next slide. And at the port, we are working to really balance our role as an economic driver with a sustainable maritime future, moving toward this vision of zero emission operations by 2050. And clean fuels are really a key part of achieving that vision. So we really are aiming to be a premier global gateway for sustainable commerce and travel, a hub for zero emission shipping and for zero emission cruising, and doing all of this in the context of building resilient infrastructure for our operations, both today and into the future, as well as for our businesses into the future, and ensuring the health and prosperity of local communities and within our region. Next slide. And the challenge here, as shown by the chart on this slide, is that to achieve that zero emission vision, we need to really address our sources of greenhouse gas emissions. And when you look at the portfolio of the breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions associated with Port of Seattle, Port of Tacoma, and the Northwest Seaport Alliance's operations in the region, over half of those are from waterside fuel use. So if you look at ocean-going vessels on the chart here, as well as harbor vessels, and even within ocean-going vessels, we do have strategies such as shore power that are addressing emissions from vessels at berth. but that's really only a third of the total emissions from ocean-going vessels. And we're measuring those greenhouse gas emissions from our berths at the port all the way out to the US-Canada border. So about 2/3 of those vessel emissions are occurring as ships are traveling to and from the port berth. So that's really why we see the need to focus on clean fuels as a key piece of our overall port-wide decarbonization strategy. Next slide. And so kind of getting into what our sustainable maritime fuel strategy looks like, I will preface this by saying that this strategy is really in development. It's been evolving over time, and in a way we are somewhat flying the plane as we're building it. And so this slide really shows how we're thinking currently about our sustainable maritime fuels strategy and how we've identified these different conditions for success, as these are the conditions that are needed to support the development and deployment of sustainable maritime fuels at scale. And the conditions that we've identified include the need for a clear and committed demand that can support production and supply, a reliable supply chain, including both the production piece, but also transportation of the fuel, storage, and bunkering facilities in place to serve our port. We also need stable regulations and incentives that can really get at the market economics that are needed to narrow the cost gap with conventional fuel options. And then to ensure that there are safety procedures in place for both fuel handling and fuel bunkering. And then community and tribal awareness and involvement and engagement in this process we see as a very critical piece throughout the process, because we need to ensure that those risks and benefits of these new fuels are managed and really understood to ensure there's kind of general support as we are deploying new fuels within our operations. And then finally, looking at how we can support different demonstration projects and early deployment to really get at what are the barriers to advancing these fuels at scale, and how can these projects, demonstrate and remove those barriers to support innovation. And then making investments in the workforce and in training and connections between the deployments of new fuels and economic development opportunity in the region is also a key piece of this work. And across all of these conditions, sort of our theory is that, the port might have a different role to play within each of these areas. And in some, we might have more of a direct role than others. So for example, we might have a more of a direct role in terms of establishing safe bunkering procedures, or engaging near port communities, or engaging tribal governments. Whereas in other areas within these conditions, we might play more of a facilitatory role or a convening role to convene the different industry partners that are really going to be the main actors in these different areas. Next slide. And so just to kind of summarize our strategy is that we're really actively planning for a multi-fuel future here in Seattle. And I think that, a lot of ports are kind of in this position. There's not just one single option that the industry is gravitating toward. And so this slide really shows, where our different areas of focus are. And I'll say that this is really where we're focused currently and could really evolve over time as the landscape changes. And at Port of Seattle, since we do have this big focus on cruise and our cruise business and low and zero emission options for cruise, we're really not as focused on ammonia as a fuel option, at least not currently, just because it's not focused to serve cruise and not really seen as a viable option for cruise in the near term. But we do have a lot of emphasis on exploring methanol and exploring green methanol. We have a green methanol feasibility study underway that's part of our Green Corridor partnership that includes Vancouver Fraser Port Authority and the 3 major cruise lines that sail to Alaska. And we also have some other projects underway with methanol to do a bunkering exercise and establish safe bunkering procedures, as well as looking at demand aggregation for methanol across the region. And then kind of in the middle there, as we look at other fuels and the port's areas of focus, We're also thinking about biofuels, particularly as a port that has maritime side of the house as well as an aviation side of the house. There are a lot of potential connections between sustainable aviation fuel production and renewable diesel production or other biofuel production. So we do have an interest there. And then we are also tracking LNG use, but it would need to transition to non-fossil or renewable LNG to be considered kind of a long-term decarbonization solution. We do see for LNG that the supply chain is already establishing itself. Those vessels are on order, and we're already beginning to see LNG deployments in the region. So we're preparing to have our first LNG cruise ship come this upcoming cruise season, and are working with different stakeholders and agencies to ensure that there are safe bunkering practices established for LNG. So we do see that as an opportunity to really kind of learn from the establishment of those procedures and then apply those lessons to other low and zero emission fuel alternatives. Next slide. This last slide really just highlights different projects underway that are building towards those conditions that are needed to support sustainable maritime fuels. And some I've highlighted already, such as our Green Corridor project and our methanol bunkering assessment. A few others to highlight include a regional sustainable maritime fuels collaborative that was launched last year. That collaborative is bringing together different stakeholders across the industry with the goal to look at the current gaps in the region and inform state and regional policy that could really support the deployment of sustainable maritime fuels and technologies at scale in the region. And then we also have several projects underway focused on aggregating demand and developing a fuel supply acquisition strategy, convening different stakeholders in a fuel buyers roundtable, and also assessing workforce impacts and workforce development opportunities, and some extensive community engagement work that will be launching this year. So I'll stop there, and so that we have time to move on to the next speakers, but look forward to addressing any questions related to this work later in the webinar today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. That's a fantastic presentation. I just want to call out like the slide where you highlighted how much alignment is needed across different institutions and stakeholders and policy. That was really eye-opening and brought to life the scale of the transformation, and that this is a systems level transformation, right? Not one organization acting alone. So it's a real testament to the Port of Seattle's leadership to play that facilitating and convening role. Thanks so much. I noted it's a work in progress, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. Next, we're turning to our second speaker. So this is Øystein, Chief Sustainability Officer at Odfjell. And from a shipping perspective, Odfjell has moved early on biofuels and is advancing a Brazil to Europe green corridor that we're excited to hear more about. So Odfjell and Øystein, for you, the question is, what has it taken operationally, commercially, to make biofuels work today, and what will be required to scale your corridor beyond this phase? Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and greetings from Norway. You're available to hear me? Able to hear me? That's good. Yes, so I thought I would just give a quick introduction to what we are doing to start there. So I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell. We are one of the largest companies in the world in our segment of transporting chemicals. So we are a chemical tanker operator. So these ships that you see behind me here, these are large tankers. They operate globally. We own and operate about 80 of these tankers, and we have a new building program where we expect 20 new ships coming into our fleet. So we are definitely one of the absolutely biggest in this segment. So the chemicals that we transport, some of those chemicals, all of those chemicals, they go into everyday life. Everything that we surround ourselves with, from paint to makeup to medicines to industrial products. So most likely, if you touch anything around you, it has most likely had parts of it being transported on an oilfield ship. So these are chemicals that is essential for a lot of other industries. And some of those products, they are some of the most hazardous products, liquids that's been produced, and we transport that through some of the most fragile environments. And that means something for us. That means something for safety and responsibility. And that means that the sustainability aspects of everything that we do is something that is really, really high on the agenda. We really recognize the challenges of climate change. We firmly believe that this is something that we humans have created, and that it's also our responsibility to do something about it. So that's a responsibility that we feel deeply. Climate change will affect people. It will affect businesses. So we need to do whatever we can. And for us, it's about thinking long term. It's about the decisions that we are taking today that we're going to live with for many years ahead. And kind of the best example of that is that we have been around for more than 110 years. And we intend to do so going forward. And that means that we have been very, very proactive in everything that we're trying to do, to be very forward-leaning and trying to do what we can with the measures that is available today. And that means that we have had a continuous focus, and we can go back to about 2008, where we really looked at how can we reduce emissions from and actually reduce fuel consumption from these vessels. So we started a program to see how can we reduce the fuel. And over time, we saw that that's the benefit of reducing fuel is that you reduce cost and also you reduce emission. And going on from 2008, we have seen the attention to reducing emission has been really, really growing. And what we have done is that we have taken steps all the way in looking at what is available today, what can we do today. And we have taken in adopting all energy-saving devices. We have looked at how we operate the vessel, how can we retrofit the vessel with everything that is available, and through more than 120 different projects we have done on our vessels, we have been able to reduce the carbon intensity of the ships with more than 55%. And we're coming down to that curve is flattening out because we're running on traditional fuel, right? And on fossil fuel. We're in the deep sea segment. So when you're crossing the Atlantic, there are really no other alternative than a combustion engine to do that. So when you flatten that out, we need to kind of take another steps. So what we have did is that on these vessels here, we fitted sails on these ships. And we have tested that and had a tremendous effect. And what we also did is that we tested the vessel going from Europe to the US. And on the way back, we were running that vessel with the sails, and we are running that on biofuel as well. And that combination, that demonstrated that it's actually possible to go almost net zero with deep sea tanker business today. So that journey going from the US back to Europe, that was compliant with the regulation that's going to be valid in 2045. So we reduced energy with 85%. So that's a kind of the DNA of Odfjell, that we are trying to do whatever we can with measures that is available today. So Anna, coming back to the Green Corridor. So back at COP26, we looked at the Clydebank Declaration, and we agreed that we need to kind of solve this chicken and egg problem. We need to solve that problem that everyone is sitting on the fence and waiting. So the idea of Green Corridor was really developed, and a lot of 22 nations signed up to that. But since then, nothing really had happened. The Green Corridors, it's a long list of ambitions, of MOUs. There are some that's actually working. Those are kind of smaller corridors. The first ones are actually kind of ferries in Norway crossing the fjords, because then the government said that, okay, we're going to use a net zero ferry to cross the fjord here. I know that we know that does not exist, but that's what we want, and we're willing to pay for that. And that purpose, what happened is that drove the market. It drove technology development. It drove infrastructure. So now at the moment, it is a market for net zero ferries. It is infrastructure. So that was the kind of first step. And this is the green corridors is really trying to scale up that idea to be able to kind of finance and demonstrate. But nothing had happened. I think that, well, we believe that one of the biggest challenges of that is coming down to who's going to pay for it. Who's going to pay for that difference? Who's going to pay for using green fuels in a green corridor? So what we thought that is that let's try to make one ourselves. So we did, and we have established then contracts in Brazil and in Europe to where we commit to using biofuel with one vessel about once a month to about 12 sailings a year in the long term, going from Brazil to Europe. And the idea of that is that we wanted to drive the market, we want to drive the demand, we want to demonstrate that it's possible, and we want to give predictability for the fuel producer, saying that we're going to buy that fuel for a long period of time going ahead. And that means that you need to develop good infrastructure, you need to develop certification to make sure that fuel is fully sustainable and certified sustainable. So we're not compromising any other challenges like land use change or fuel that's could have been gone to food. So that has been something that has been important for us. So we have just started that. We started the 2 first sailings. We started that this year. We have it has received a lot of attention because it is now, as far as we know at least, the first really operational deep sea operational green corridor. So another kind of chapter in the Odfjell history of really trying to push new solutions and push what is available. And you had some kind of smaller, more detailed questions that I didn't answer, but I can follow up on that. But I felt it was important to just understand the context of it as well.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Øystein. I think you've covered lots of it, and we will have some questions and time for discussion, but I really loved hearing about your approach. First of all, congratulations and very ambitious, and not just ambitious, but actually delivering on this impact. I heard so many stats there in terms of reducing energy 85%, and I heard this 3-pronged approach. Your laser sharp focus on the sort of efficiency, first of all. I love that. Sometimes we are not spending as much time talking about that, but I feel like that is kind of understood, and seems like it is kind of pursuing that relentlessly from your shipping company's perspective.
Yeah, so the question that we get the most is that what fuel do you bet on going forward? And we say that we don't really know, and we don't really, it's not that important for us. We are very agnostic. We're going to be very flexible. We're going to be able to run on that fuel that's going to be available. And then it's a tons of argument on the different kinds of fuels. But what we do know, and we don't know the kind of progress and when that will happen. What we do know is that alternative fuel is going to be more expensive. We know that it probably will not have the same energy density. So for us, what you can do now is that you want to reduce the fuel consumption, making sure that your vessels are as efficient as possible, and that's what we can do today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for underlining that as well. I also took away from your comments how you captured that the corridor is actually how you are scaling the impact. So you already put a vessel on and completed a pilot. And I think what is distinct in the way that you talk about this, perhaps from other corridor initiatives, is where the corridor is seen as the pilot. And in your case, the corridor is actually the way to scale beyond the pilot, which I think is very distinct. Okay, so we're going to come back to you with some other questions. I would like to make some time now to hand over to Lisa. So Lisa, turning to you. You are Director of Environmental Management at the Port of Los Angeles, and you're helping to catalyze the market for green methanol through bunkering pilots and procurement-led approaches. So could you please walk us through why the Port is pursuing this direction, and how tools like requests for information and requests for proposals can help de-risk the investment the way that you're seeing it.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Lisa Wunder. I'm the Director of Environmental Management at the Port of LA. And as I go through my projects and my presentation, you'll probably notice that there's a lot of similarities both in our history and in our ambition looking forward with the Port of Seattle. And one thing we're really proud of is our collaborations that we do have with other ports around the world, including the Port of Seattle, where we're able to share information because there's so many ports around the world, so many other entities and stakeholders that are doing very similar work right now, and it's very important. There's always going to be some cases where some work is going to be duplicated, but we're hoping that we can build off of the knowledge and successes of other ports as we move forward. So before I go into the details, just a little bit of background. So we are the Port of Los Angeles. Right next to us is the Port of Long Beach. We are two separate ports on a business sense, but on environmental programs, especially our air quality programs, we recognize that we share the same air. We're located right next to each other with just an imaginary line between us. So for the last 2 decades, we've worked really hand in hand with the Port of Long Beach to do programs, which in what we call is our San Pedro Bay. Next slide. So in the United States, Port of LA and Port of Long Beach are the #1 and #2 ports. When you put us together, we're in the top 10 of worldwide ports. Next slide. And like Port of Seattle, we have many different lines of business in the Port of LA. However, we are primarily a container port. I think about 90% of our trade business is through containers, but we also have cruise lines. We have lots of visitor serving amenities. We've actually had a big push to move a lot of our industrial business away from the community and to repurpose those areas for public use. We also have some liquid bulk, which comes into play as we start to discuss methanol and other future fuels. We also have a fruit terminal, steel. We have one vehicle import facility, and we also have recycling. Next slide. And then really a lot of our environmental work, we go back to 20 years ago. It really started with our LA and Long Beach Clean Air Action Plan. And in that plan, we highlighted specific measures to reduce emissions from the 5 major mobile source categories that operate in and around the ports, which is ships, trucks, trains, cargo handling equipment, and hovercraft. And I could do a whole long presentation just on all of these, but in summary, we have goals for all trucks coming in and out of the Port of Los Angeles to be zero emission by 2035. We already have over 600 either electric or hydrogen zero emission trucks that are actively working at the port. I think that's probably unique from the rest of the world, but we're showing that it is possible, it is happening, and these trucks are in operation. Our second big goal is all zero emission terminal equipment by 2030. Then going into shipping, where I'll talk more a little bit about our shipping corridors. Going back in time, we were the first port in the world to plug in a container ship to shore power, so it's our fault. No, just kidding. So glad to be the first to show and adopt these more efficient operations for cleaner vessels. We also belong to ESI. We also give financial incentives for vessel speed reduction. We have several projects for hovercraft. We're doing a test of some zero emission mode hovercraft right now. And similarly with our short line rail partners, we're looking at battery electric locomotives, and we have 2 different demonstration projects for that going on right now. Next slide. And we do track our emissions annually, and compared to 2005, again, for those 5 major mobile source categories, we've had just about as extreme emission reductions as I think I've seen in any industry anywhere. So in the last 20 years, even though container throughput has been up 38% at the Port of LA, we have emission reductions 90% down diesel particulate matter, 98% down sulfur oxides, 73% down nitrogen oxides, and greenhouse gases, not as much yet, down 18%. But as we look to transition and electrify, we do believe there'll be the co-benefits for both the priority pollutants and also for the greenhouse gas. It's interesting compared to the rest of the world. Everyone, is focused on greenhouse gas. Our priority at the Port of LA is still the priority pollutants, and that's the pollutants that have health concerns for our neighboring communities. So we're definitely looking at fuels that will reduce greenhouse gases without having the penalty of increasing any of those other pollutants. Next slide. So we are, as the previous speaker said, we are one of the ports that have lots of MOUs to do green shipping corridors. And the one we've really moved forward on is our Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, and Shanghai green shipping corridor. And the goal of that is to have zero emission equipment on the terminals and then have a zero carbon mode of travel across the Pacific between the 3 ports. Next slide. And the partners, in addition to the 3 ports, we also have C40 cities. Our shipping lines are CMA CGM, Costco, O&E, Maersk, and Evergreen. And our initial goal was by 2025 to begin deploying zero emission carbon capable ships onto the corridor. We did have our first methanol ship, Maersk ship, come last year to the Port of LA. We've had a couple other ships running on methanol that were not container ships also visiting the Port of LA. At 2030 goal, work together to demonstrate the feasibility of deploying a zero life cycle carbon emission container ship into the corridor. Next slide. And this is, I just spoken that was the first methanol ship coming into the Port of LA in 2024. All right, so now getting into our bunkering project. Next slide. So this project is a part of our green shipping corridor with the assistance of C40. What we found is in the last couple of years, our partner in Shanghai, there have been methanol facilities that have been developed, and methanol is now currently being produced in China and many other countries. So we're looking at what we can do on the West Coast where we currently don't have a supply established of methanol. So as more carriers adopt methanol vessels, we need a reliable West Coast refueling option. And we're kind of starting at square one. How do we do this? We do see that many ships are being ordered in addition to conventional oil bunkers. We do see methanol, LNG, and other ships starting to be ordered, and we do see, especially along our corridor, the intention for methanol to be used. And like other speakers have said, we are still fuel agnostic, but we did want to focus in a little bit for this project and look at methanol, because according to the order books, we do believe that that's maybe the next fuel. And we do already have some infrastructure for LNG and CNG. So next slide. Oh, it's the continuation of this slide. So we're proposing a pilot program that's going to establish the first operational methanol bunkering capability in the United States at the ports of LA and Long Beach. And our pilot is designed to demonstrate safe, compliant, and commercially viable barge-to-ship methanol bunkering operations that serve as a replicable and scalable model for future clean fuel deployment across the US and across the world. Next slide. So in order to do this, with the assistance of C40 cities, we a few months ago released a request for information to gain a clearer, more detailed understanding of methanol bunkering operations, including market readiness, safety protocols, supply chain, consortium interests, and regulatory and permitting requirements. And we really released this RFI not knowing who was going to respond, if there would be much of a response, but we were looking for any stakeholders, either partnerships or entities on their own that might be interested or might have information for us for a potential methanol bunkering pilot project. Next slide. So we were very happy that we did receive 21 responses. So we had a lot of turnout, both from consortiums, fuel suppliers, and solution advisory companies. And we had strong interest and detailed responses from these entities. So some of the initial feedback that we got back from the request for information was almost all the shipping lines were interested in a barge to ship type of refueling. For storage and logistics considerations, there was an interest or a desire that retrofitting existing liquid bulk storage infrastructure would be the most straightforward way of converting to alternative fuel or methanol. And we did hear concerns about the timelines for retrofitting barges and storage tanks was less of a month kind of exercise and more like a several year type of exercise. And we did hear again from shipping lines and fuel, and thank you, and fuel suppliers that they're looking at operational readiness 2026 to 2028. With the lead time for pilot scale operations in 1 to 2 years and commercial scale methanol bunkering between 3 to 5 years for infrastructure build out, permitting, and investment alignment. And anything that needs to be built in California with our CEQA and NEPA process, 3 to 5 years is probably hopeful. Next slide. So the requested duration of a pilot project was 3 years. The annual bunkering capacity, the stakeholders stated that there has to be at least 50,000 metric tons of methanol per year to support at least 10 to 12 bunkering events per year. And the storage capacity, there could be use of our existing liquid bulk storage infrastructure within the Port of LA at approximately 70,000 barrels. And that would be converting above ground storage tanks that currently hold conventional fuel to methanol fuel. So the bunkering method under consideration is a barge to ship, as indicated and advised by our request for information. The fuel type, marine grade methanol meeting ISO specifications. Of course, our long term is for green and renewable methanol, but we understand and we heard feedback that initially the supply may be gray, green, or blended methanol. We also heard feedback about tracking and reporting carbon intensity, which will be very important, especially since a lot of these fuels come from different suppliers and there's still some uncertainty about how green some of these fuels are. Next slide. So we definitely heard back that there's a lot of regulatory and permitting needed to make this pilot project happen. So we'll need to coordinate with regulators, including the Coast Guard, fire departments and other agencies, conducting safety reviews and doing risk assessments, meeting all safety standards, being able to secure required permits for tank retrofits and bunkering, working with our local air quality management district to address VOC rules and applications for the storage of different fuels. And as I mentioned before, having compliance with the CEQA and NEPA process. And our next step is to, we're talking with the stakeholders that submitted comments as part of the RFI, and then we'll be releasing an RFP to perform the actual pilot project. And we are hoping for a consortium that would consist of a fuel supplier, barge bunkering operator, terminal operators, and shipping lines. Next slide. And finally, our next step in the next month or so will be issuing the request for proposal and continuing our stakeholder engagement with our neighboring communities. I didn't touch much on it in this presentation, but making sure our community and the various stakeholders are aware of the different fuels and the various safety aspects of these fuels and become better educated is definitely important if we want to have support for this new operation in the San Pedro Bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Lisa, and thank you to all of our presenters. There was lots to unpack there as well. My key takeaways, as with Ryan, really impressive to see the whole operating system of the port transforming across business lines and all the different kinds of assets that you're responsible for. I also love the project that you outlined in terms of the bunkering pilot as an example of getting over the chicken or egg challenge. I think so many organizations with this level of complexity, you see a lot of organizations just indefinitely pushing the decision making down the line, right? We don't know what fuel it is, we don't know, so we're just not going to do anything. But you're demonstrating that there are these no regret moves where, well, at least let's shape what this market looks like, what the changes are that we would need, let's just fully understand the pathway and the transition roadmap so that we can be prepared. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I've loved seeing the discussion in the chat, and I also love that some of the questions have been answered. 2 more questions have shown up. I'm going to get to those in a minute, but I'm going to ask, I think if the people hosting this session are okay, we could have the cameras on for people so that we can see each other. I'm going to start with some questions, and I'm going to try and take ones that we've seen in the chat and kind of combine them. So a couple of the questions are really around policy rollbacks. So I think let's just address that, but also we don't have to spend too long on it because I think Oystein had a really good comment that the policy direction is not only driven by what's happening in North America, but a few comments from our colleagues. So how are you seeing this show up in terms of the capital and funding that you might have available with changes in the US? And also for the IMO, we have less of certainty around the net zero framework and kind of that mechanism to address a green premium for fuels. So maybe just a short comment from everyone. I'll start with Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Shiveria. It's a really good question. And from our perspective, I mean, a lot has changed just with the change in the administration in the US and the IMO postponement. And essentially, I think it highlights the importance of looking at, what we can do locally within our authority as a port authority. And then also, we've really shifted our focus to Washington State and the region and thinking about, are there opportunities for new state policy that could support this, or are there opportunities to coordinate with other ports along the West Coast? So that's kind of how we're thinking about kind of the absence of like a national policy driver in this. And then also with the IMO postponement, I think it has kind of changed the landscape and shifted some of our projects. So we have this Green Corridor project where we've been working with the cruise lines. That project is reaching kind of the 4-year mark. So we launched it in spring of 2022, and we started a study of looking at the feasibility of green methanol, specifically looking at green methanol in 4 cruise ships by 2032. But the work on that study launched in like 2023 and 2024, and then sort of everything has changed since then. So it definitely creates a challenge, and I think we're kind of actively working through, what that means for us and specifically on that project. But I do think it still highlights the importance of some of this more like specific local and regional work, which Green Corridors fit into that, and then some of our other kind of like local coordination, regional coordination work fits into that.
Thanks, Ryan. And Lisa, if you could add anything to that perspective, I'd also be interested in hearing, you could ask this question in a different way. One is, okay, the policy is weaker. What do we do? The other way to ask this is, what are you seeing as the motivation from, so just one comment from you, Lisa, on this, please.
Sure. I mean, we're fortunate in California that we still have the state of California. The California Air Resources Board just announced their intention to move forward with ocean-going vessel rulemaking, which will likely include some type of requirement towards zero-emission vessels. Maybe not in the very short term, but in the longer term. So we're definitely going to participate with other stakeholders in that rulemaking. And, a lot of this is still business driven. The order books for ships doesn't lie. That's showing that shipping operators have made that commitment in, the tens of millions of dollars to move forward with these dual fuel ships. And again, it isn't just North America that's determining this policy, it's worldwide. And we were really, we were heartened to see that IMO in previous years did make those greenhouse gas zero carbon goals and ambitions. And, there's a delay, but we still continue. We haven't seen in our green shipping corridor any of the stakeholders backing away from anything, and we still want to bring these ships into our ports as soon as possible.
Got it. Thank you, Lisa. Øystein, would you like to weigh in on this briefly so we can also make time for other questions?
Yes, without getting too political also, I think that everyone was really looking forward to have clarity. So when we have the strategy that came in 2023, the new strategy, everyone was really excited that we now have a clear idea on where we're going to go. And all of them, IMO member nations, have been working on different plans for a couple of years. To try to find a best possible way. The net zero framework was not perfect, but what it would have been and what was agreed in April is it's an agreed that we're going to adopt this because it gives clarity. It gives clarity for fuel choice. It gives clarity for investments for us as an operator and owner. It gives clarity for what we're going to do in going forward. And it also kind of take away the uncertainty of alternative different systems around the world. So when this was failed and when this was blocked by one delegation that threatened everyone else to postpone it, we are now pushed into uncertainty. I think that the most mature and most of the ship owners and IMO members will still keep their targets. We will still keep on our climate targets and continue our path. The challenge now is that since there is no clarity on this, in the EU where we are operating, we have a emission trading scheme, and we have also a fuel EU maritime regulation regulates the fuel intensity of the carbon intensity of the fuel. Now we're going to see that such ETS systems, the carbon tax system, they will pop up in different locations. So now UK is going to have an ETS system. 2 weeks ago, two or three African nations is going to develop their ETS systems. Then it's going to happen in India, it's going to happen in China, and since they're coming a lot of revenues into Europe, why shouldn't the US also establish their own? So it's going to be a mess and a nightmare, and it's going to drive cost. It's going to drive cost for everyone. It's going to drive cost for the different nations. It's not going back to the industry. It's not going to support the green transition. So that's why we, as a ship owner, we trying to be having a very sharp focus on what we're going to achieve. We think that this is going to be, we still firmly believe that it's going to be commercially important that we continue our journey on reducing carbon intensity and achieving our net zero targets in 2050.
Yeah, thank you so much for shining a light on that. It's often pitted as policy will add costs, but actually the lack of alignment and the lack of clarity can also increase costs. So this is
Absolutely.
not yes, really, really well said. Thank you. There are a couple of questions that I'm not going to get to. One is there was a question around electrification and power supply. I'd like to suggest to our VMCC team we have a separate session on that topic because it's an important one. And then there was also some discussion in the chat about the impact on crews and training and procedures and workforce. And I think that is also warrants a discussion of its own. One really important question that was sort of parked in there, which is really important, is where is the methanol coming from? So I'd love to hear some comments from each of you around what that discussion with the production side looks like and how your organization is trying to influence or shape that conversation. So I'll start with you this time, Oystein, go reverse order.
Yeah, so we have been assessing the various different kind of fuels and looking at methanol as an example. Most methanol, I don't have the exact number, let's say 95% of all methanol, 99% of all methanol produced is coming from natural gas. So that means that if you look at fuel in a life cycle assessment, which you have to do, of course, it can solve our problems, but we need to look at the production as well. So in the life cycle assessment, if we adopt to traditional gray methanol, the total amount of emissions will increase with about 12%. So methanol, gray methanol, is not the solution. So it has to be green methanol. And the same with ammonia. If you just use ammonia produced through natural gas without the e-ammonia, the green ammonia, it will increase the total emissions. So the only solution then for in the long term, that this has to be green fuels, and in order to do that, you need to produce hydrogen through electrolysis, and then you make the methanol using biogenic CO2. And both of them are limiting factors. So green energy, it will require enormous amount of green energy. So in our calculations, we have estimated that if you wanted to, let's say if you could take the global fleet and run that on an e-fuel tomorrow, that will take half the world's non-fossil energy to do that. And if you're able to do that, that energy that you're taking away from the grid or from others, they have to be replaced as well. So it's going to be an extreme competition for green energy going forward to produce e-fuels. So for us, that's what we're saying, that this is it will take a long time until we get that amount of energy to do that. And also what I think that what Maersk has experienced when they started also with their kind of pilot journey, they saw also that they also struggle with getting access to biogenic CO2 to use to produce methanol. And that's why we see a lot of problems with regards to the e-fuel. An e-fuel would be great if you get it, and the price would be very expensive. But that's why we use the drop-in fuel biofuel, sustainable biofuel, certified sustainable biofuel. No safety concerns, works perfect in the engines, and solve a lot of our challenges and problems. And it's available today. You can burn it today, and the volume available is sufficient going forward. At least in the medium term. Of course, when all other sectors need to decarbonize at the same time, there will be a kind of fight on that. But we're not using the same kind of molecules as they use in airlines. So in our studies, we believe that biofuel will be the absolutely best solution for us in the medium term.
Thank you. And Lisa, definitely want to hear from both you and Ryan on this point. Lisa, next.
Yeah, for us, that's the goal of the RFI and the RFP. We have more local suppliers. We're a department of the City of LA. There's an effort going on in the City of LA to develop its first methanol production facility. So that's an option. We've also been approached by several different private companies. But as we move forward to the RFP stage, which will be released in about a month, and it will be available not only on our website at the Port of LA, but also on the C40 website. It'll be publicized through our websites and through social media when that RFP is released. And someone asked in the questions about our role. We're really a facilitator. Our port has never been a fueling port with fueling on site, but we know it's important to have the fuel here. So we want to be able to bring the partners together and at least get this get this off the ground. And someone also asked about if that rules out, we're not ruling out ammonia or anything else in the future. We're just trying to focus a little bit, seeing that methanol in our area seems to be the fuel that it seems to be the next one on the horizon. So tried to answer a lot in less than a minute.
Sorry about that timing.
No problem.
There's never enough time, but absolutely, I'm also excited for this RFP process. For others, there is also the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance, who have had RFPs on seeing what fuel is available, and those processes themselves have illuminated a lot. I'm going to take one more minute and allow Ryan to answer the question and then wrap up.
Yeah, I think for us, Javaria, we aren't really at the point of knowing, exactly where the methanol would come from. In our work right now, we're focused on kind of understanding what is the demand across the Seattle-Tacoma Gateway. In our Green Corridor project. In our feasibility study, we did work with a fuel producer partner, but they kind of just provided data as an input into the study and into the cost estimates, but we don't believe that their fuel production project is necessarily continuing into full investment and actually standing up that facility. So that's still a big question for us, is really kind of like, what's the source of that fuel supply?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I mean, lots of questions. This is still a live process and a really exciting one, and I think globally transforming one. So thank you three for sharing so deeply of your expertise and knowledge on the topic. I think it was very informative for us. I'm going to hand back to Wilma, but for all of you who are listening from in BC and Canada, I think this is a really important discussion for how we are similarly going to organize ourselves to answer this question of how will we be a clean fuels hub in British Columbia and in Canada. So thanks to the speakers, and I will hand over to Wilma to let you know what you can expect next from VMCC. Thank you.
Great. Thank you again to our speakers for your time and very thought-provoking presentations. Just to let everyone know, the presentations and the video of this event will be available on our website in a few days. Let's get things cleaned up and edited. I also wanted to give everyone a heads up on upcoming events in this monthly speaker series. So next month, on March 18th, so 4 weeks from today, will be DNV speaking about wind-assisted propulsion. In April, we're looking at H-Tech, which is a local hydrogen company. And then a special event in May. We will be at the University of British Columbia. This is a live in-person event, and we will be recording workshops and presentations as they have. So, with UBC Sailbot, the mechanical engineering and naval architecture group, it will be really exciting. There's going to be tours of labs. There's going to be a couple of workshops, and then a reception afterwards. And in June, we'll be Marine Labs. And then we'll be on hiatus for the summer unless, somebody sticks their hands up and says, hey, we really want to do another presentation in July or August. So thank you very much. The other thing is we want to hear from you. We are now starting to plan for Green Ship 2026, which is slated for Thursday, November the 20th. Reach out, send us suggestions on what you would like to see. If you, comments on what went well, what you thought we could do more of, or what less of. And we will take all your comments into consideration as we start planning for next year. And just reach us at info@vmcclimate.ca. So thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you.